Episode 1, The Abandoned Child. It's August 24th, 2011. A thin, sickly man, barely 56 years old, stands before Apple's board of directors. His gaunt face contrasts with the determination in his eyes. Steve Jobs is stepping down as CEO of the company he founded, the company he saved from bankruptcy, the empire worth more than $350 billion. But this story doesn't start here. It begins 41 years earlier in a San Francisco hospital room, where a young college student is about to make the most difficult decision of her life, a decision that will change the course of global technology. Because to understand how one man revolutionized 6 different industries, we must first understand why that man spent his entire life trying to prove something. February 1955, San Francisco, California. Joanne Stiebel, a 23-year-old young woman of German origin, is in a university hospital. She has just given birth to a baby boy, but she can't keep him. Her father, a conservative immigrant from Wisconsin, has threatened to disinherit her if she marries Abdel Fattah Jandali, the baby's father, a Syrian Muslim. The social pressure is brutal. Single mothers are seen as a disgrace in 1950s America. Joa makes a heartbreaking decision to give the child up for adoption, but there's one condition. A single, non-negotiable condition. The adoptive parents must promise that the child will go to college. He must have a higher education. He must have the opportunities she couldn't give him. The hospital light dimly illuminates the crib. The baby has dark, piercing eyes. He doesn't know he's just been rejected for the first time in his life. It won't be the last. The couple who were originally planning to adopt the baby backed out at the last minute. They wanted a girl, not a boy. Second rejection. Then Paul and Clara Jobs appear, a mechanic and an accountant. Simple, working-class people. They live in Mountain View, a quiet suburb south of San Francisco, in what will soon be known as Silicon Valley. When Joanne discovers that neither of them has a college degree, she refuses to sign the adoption papers. Paul Jobs only finished high school. Clara never graduated from college. For weeks, the papers remain unsigned. The baby is in legal limbo. Finally, Paul and Clara make a solemn promise, in writing. The child will go to college, no matter the cost. Joanne signs. On February 24th, 1955, the baby was officially named Stephen Paul Jobs. But one thing remains etched deep in his psyche. He was chosen. It wasn't an accident. His parents chose him. Even though his biological parents didn't want him, someone loved him enough to seek him out. This idea, this personal narrative, will accompany him throughout his life. Mountain View, 1960. Little Steve is 5 years old. The neighborhood is full of engineers working in defense and emerging technology companies. This is no coincidence. They're at the epicenter of what will become the technological revolution. In his garage, Paul Jobs works on old cars. He buys wrecked vehicles, repairs them, and sells them. He's meticulous, a perfectionist. He teaches Steve that even the parts no one sees should be well made. One day, Paul shows his son how to restore a fence. He gives Steve a small section. He teaches him how to sand the wood, how to paint carefully, how to pay attention to every detail. Even the back of the fence should be pretty, Paul tells her. Even if no one sees it, you'll know it's there, and that matters. Steve watches his father's callous hands at work. He's learning something fundamental. Craftsmanship matters. Design matters. Perfection matters, even in the invisible. But he's also learning something else. He doesn't want to work with his hands. He wants to work with his mind. 1961. Steve enters elementary school in Mountain View. He's an immediate disaster. He's hyperactive, restless, and defiant. He's constantly bored. Teachers don't know what to do with him. He's clearly intelligent, but he doesn't fit in. He doesn't follow rules. He plays practical jokes. He disrupts classes. In 3rd grade, he and his friends release snakes in a classroom. They detonate homemade bombs in lockers. Steve is sent to the principal's office repeatedly. Paul and Clara are repeatedly called to school. Teachers suggest that Steve has behavioral problems, that he needs discipline, perhaps medication. But one teacher sees something different. Her name is Imogene Hill. She's in 4th grade. She realizes Steve doesn't have a learning disability. He's bored. The curriculum is far below his capabilities. Then Imogene does something radical. She offers Steve money for doing his schoolwork, $5 for completing a math workbook, a candy bar for finishing a project. It works. Steve gets hooked, not because of the money, but because someone is finally challenging him. At the end of the year, Steve tests out for his sophomore year. The school wants to advance him 2 full grades. His parents agree to advance him only 1. But the social damage has already been done. He's now the youngest, smallest, weirdest kid in his class. A misfit among misfits. 1967. Steve is 12 years old. His neighbor, Larry Lang, is an engineer at Hewlett-Packard, one of the most important electronics companies in Silicon Valley. Larry shows Steve a Heathkit, a self-assembling crystal radio. Steve is fascinated, not just by the device, but by the idea behind it, that something as complex as a radio can be assembled, understood, and controlled. If you can understand how this works, Larry tells him, you can understand how anything works. Steve becomes obsessed. He begins attending the Hewlett-Packard Explorers Club's evening lectures, where engineers demonstrate projects to young people interested in technology. One night, he sees a computer for the first time. It's not like today's computers. It's a room-sized machine with switches and flashing lights. It's programmed with punch cards. Only universities and large corporations can afford them. But Steve sees something else. He sees the future. He sees a world where these machines aren't locked away in laboratories, but in the hands of ordinary people, in homes, in schools, everywhere. He doesn't know how to achieve it. He doesn't even know if it's possible. But the seed has been planted. Steve is 13 years old when he needs a part for an electronics project he's building. It's a specialized part, hard to find, expensive. Look in the phone book. Find the number of Bill Hewlett, co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, one of the richest and most powerful men in Silicon Valley. And he calls him to his house, directly. The secretary doesn't stop him. In 1968, before modern corporate filters, this was possible. Bill Hewlett answers the phone. Hi, my name is Steve Jobs. I'm 13 years old, and I'm building a frequency counter. I need some parts. Hewlett laughs. He's charmed by the boy's audacity. They talk for 20 minutes. Hewlett not only gives him the parts for free, he offers him a summer job on a Hewlett-Packard assembly line. Steve immediately accepts. That summer, he works at the HP plant, screwing parts into frequency meters. It's boring and repetitive, but he's at the heart of technological innovation. He's surrounded by brilliant engineers. He's learning how a technology company works from the inside, and he's meeting people who will change his life. 1969. Steve is 14 years old when a friend tells him there's someone he should meet. He's a strange guy, his friend tells him, but he's a genius with electronics. I think you like to work together. That guy's name is Steve Wozniak. He's 19 years old. He's studying engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, and he is, indeed, a genius. They meet in a garage. Wozniak is building a computer from scratch, using only parts he's soldered himself. He's completely self-taught. He can design complex circuits in his head without the need for blueprints. But Wozniak is shy, introverted. He has no commercial ambition. He just wants to build cool things and give them away to his friends. Jobs is the opposite. He's charismatic, persuasive, ambitious. He knows almost nothing about engineering, but he understands people. He understands desire. He understands how to sell. They become friends instantly. Together, they begin to get into mischief. They build blue boxes, illegal devices that allow free long-distance phone calls by fooling the AT&T system. Wozniak builds them for fun. Jobs sees a business opportunity. They sell them on the university campus for $150 each. It's illegal. It's risky. But it works. And it teaches them a crucial lesson. Hardware and software, technical genius and business vision, engineering and design. Together, they can create something extraordinary. Together, you can change a world. But first, Steve Jobs has to lose himself completely. It's 1972. Steve Jobs has just graduated from high school. He's been accepted to Reed College, a private and expensive university in Oregon. Paul and Clara have kept their promise. They've saved for years to pay the tuition. But 6 months later, Steve drops out of college. He says he can't stand watching his parents spend all their savings on classes he has no interest in. He says he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. He says he needs to find himself. The truth is deeper. He's looking for something. He doesn't know exactly what it is, but he knows he won't find it in a classroom. What comes next will change your life forever. Because sometimes, to find your destiny, you first have to lose yourself completely. And Steve Jobs is about to lose himself in India, in drugs, in Eastern spirituality, and in a search for enlightenment that will take him to the darkest and strangest places of his soul. But from that darkness, something extraordinary will be born. Episode 2, The Search for Meaning. Reed College, Portland, Oregon. January 1973. Steve Jobs is 18 years old and has just officially dropped out of college. But he doesn't leave campus. For the next 18 months, he lives like an academic ghost. He sleeps on the floor of his friends' dorm rooms. He returns Coca-Cola bottles for 5 cents to buy food. He walks 7 miles every Sunday to get a decent free meal at the Hare Krishna Temple. But he's free to attend only the classes that interest him. And there's one that completely fascinates him: calligraphy. Professor Robert Palladino is a Trappist monk. He teaches serif and sans serif, proportional spacing, the mathematical beauty of classic typefaces, the way letters can communicate emotion, weight, authority. Steve is mesmerized. He has no idea why this will ever be useful. He just knows it's beautiful. 10 years later, when I designed the first Macintosh, it will be the first computer with beautiful typography, with proportional fonts, with visual design as a priority. And it all begins here in this calligraphy class, with a monk teaching beauty to a college dropout. 1973. Steve discovers a book that completely changes his perspective. Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. He reads it compulsively. He rereads it dozens of times. The book speaks of enlightenment, transcending ego, and connecting with something greater than oneself. Steve becomes obsessed with Eastern spirituality, with Zen Buddhism, with the idea that intuition is more powerful than intellect, that less is more, that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. These ideas, which seem so far removed from technology, will become the core of his design philosophy. He lets his hair grow. He becomes a vegetarian. He experiments with LSD. He later says that taking acid was one of the 2 or 3 most important things he ever did. He's searching for answers. He's trying to understand who he really is, why he was abandoned, what his life means. And he believes the answers lie in the East, in India, in the temples and ashrams where gurus promise enlightenment. February 1974. Steve needs money to travel to India. He returns to California and looks for work. Enter the offices of Atari, the world's most successful video game company. At the time, Pong was the most popular game in America. Atari was the future of entertainment. Steve wears sandals. His hair is long and unkempt, and his clothes are dirty. He hasn't showered in days. He believes his vegetarian diet eliminates the need to use deodorant or shower regularly. You are wrong. The receptionist tries to kick him out, but Steve refuses to leave. "I'm not leaving until I'm hired," he says. Finally, Atari founder Nolan Bushnell comes down to see what's going on. Something about Steve's boldness pleases him. He hires him on the spot. He's weird, Bushnell tells his team. He smells bad, but there's something about him. Hire him. Steve works the night shift because the other engineers complain about his smell. But he's quick, smart, and has an uncanny ability to simplify complex problems. After a few months, he has saved enough money. It's time to go to India. Summer of 1974. Steve Jobs arrives in New Delhi with his Reed College friend Dan Kaki. They have backpacks, few clothes, and no real plan. India is overwhelming. The heat is brutal. The poverty is shocking. The streets are filled with cows, vendors, beggars, and holy men. Steve visits ashrams. He talks to gurus. He seeks out Neem Karoli Baba, Ram Dass's guru, but discovers that he died the previous year. For months, he travels around northern India. He stays in temples. He meditates. He fasts. He shaves his head. He wears traditional Indian clothing. You're looking for enlightenment, transcendental answers, a divine revelation. But what he finds is disappointment. Gurus are not enlightened prophets. They are ordinary men, sometimes charlatans. Ashrams are full of confused seekers, not enlightened sages. One night, sick with dysentery, delirious with fever in a cheap hotel, Steve has a realization. You won't find the answers outside yourself. There's no guru who can give them to you. There's no manual for enlightenment. He must create it himself. He must forge his own path. He must trust his intuition. Fall of 1974. Steve returns to California. His hair is shorter. His gaze is more focused. His mind is clearer. He didn't find what he was looking for in India, but he found something more important. The certainty that he must trust himself, that he must follow his intuition, that he must build, create, and act. He returns to work at Atari. He lives with his parents in Los Altos. He rekindles his friendship with Wozniak, who now works as an engineer at Hewlett-Packard. Woz is working on something interesting in his spare time. He's building a personal computer from scratch, not to sell, just for fun. Because in 1974, computers were gigantic machines that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The idea that anyone could have a computer in their home was science fiction. But there's a small underground movement, a group of fanatics who believe computers should be for everyone, that technology should be democratized. They call themselves the Homebrew Computer Club, and they are about to change the world. March 1975, a garage in Menlo Park. 30 nerds are sitting on folding chairs, sharing homemade circuit diagrams. This is the Homebrew Computer Club, the first meeting of what will become the personal computing movement. Steve Wozniak is here. He's bringing his design for a computer he built with less than $100 in parts. It's sleek, efficient, brilliant. The other members are amazed. Most home computers require hundreds of chips. Woz has reduced the design to a fraction of that number. Woz, you should sell this, they tell him. Wozniak laughs. Sell it? Why? I want to give it away. I want everyone to be able to build one. But there's someone else watching. Someone who sees something different. Steve Jobs sees an opportunity. A few days later, Jobs seeks out Wozniak at Hewlett-Packard. Woz, we should sell your computer, says Jobs. Wozniak shakes his head. Steve, I'm not a businessman. I just want to work at HP and build fun things in my spare time. But Jobs is persistent, persuasive, visionary. It's not about the money, says Jobs. It's about doing something that matters. How many times in your life do you have the opportunity to do something that changes the world? Wozniak hesitates. He has a good job, a stable salary, security. Jobs continues to press. Look, even if we lose money, at least we'll have our own company. At least we'll have tried. Isn't that worth it? Finally, Wozniak gives in. Not because he believes he'll succeed, but because his friend believes in him. Okay, says Woz. Let's do it. They need a name. Jobs has just returned from a communal farm where he worked in the apple orchards. He's on one of his fruit-only diets. How about Apple Computer? He suggests. Sounds friendly, approachable, not intimidating like IBM or Digital Equipment Corporation. Wozniak shrugs. Sure, Apple's fine. They have no idea they've just been named the most valuable company in the world. April 1st, 1976. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and a third partner, Ron Wayne, sign a partnership agreement. Apple Computer Company is officially founded. Jobs is 45%. Wozniak has 45%. Wayne has 10% as the referee between the two Steves. The startup capital is ridiculous. Jobs sells his Volkswagen van for $1,500. Wozniak sells his HP 65 calculator for $500. They have $2,000, a garage, and an idea. The plan is simple. Wozniak will build computers. Jobs will sell them. But there's a problem. They don't have any customers. So Jobs does what he does best. He sells. He goes to the Byte Shop, one of the first computer stores in Mountain View. The owner, Paul Terrell, had been at the homebrew meeting where Woz showed off his design. "I'll buy 50 computers from you," Terrell says. "But they have to be fully assembled. Not kits, finished machines." Jobs almost shouted with excitement. "Done." Terrell names the price. $500 per computer. $25,000 total. It is the largest order Apple has ever received. It is also impossible to fulfill. Jobs and Wozniak have a problem. They need parts to build 50 computers. But they don't have the money to buy them. Jobs goes to an electronics supplier. He tells them he has a $25,000 order from Byte Shop. He asks for credit. 30 days to pay. Suppliers are skeptical. These are two 20-somethings working in a garage. They have no credit history, no collateral, but Jobs is convincing. He shows the purchase order. He mentions the name of Byte Shop. He promises to pay within 30 days. Finally, one agrees. Then another. Jobs gets the parts on credit. Now they have to build 50 computers in 30 days. Paul and Clara Jobs' garage becomes an assembly line. Steve Wozniak solders motherboards by hand. Jobs enlists his sister, friends, anyone who can help. They work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. The garage smells of welding and stress. Ron Wayne, the third partner, can't handle the pressure. He's 52 years old. He's seen businesses fail before. He's terrified of debt. 12 days after signing the partnership agreement, Ron Wayne sells his 10% of Apple for $800. It's the worst financial decision in the history of business. That 10% would be worth more than $150 billion today. 30 days later, Jobs and Wozniak deliver 50 motherboards to Byte Shop. They aren't complete computers. They don't have cases, keyboards, or monitors. But they work. Paul Terrell pays $25,000. Jobs pays the suppliers. They're barely left with any profit. But it doesn't matter, because they've done something extraordinary. They've created a company from nothing. They've sold 50 computers, handmade in a garage. And now, Steve Jobs knows something with absolute certainty. This is just the beginning. It's the summer of 1976. Apple has sold 200 units of the Apple I. It's a modest success. But Jobs is already thinking bigger. Wozniak is designing a new computer. Something revolutionary. A machine with color graphics, sound, and a molded plastic casing. A computer that anyone can use, not just engineers. They'll call it Apple II, but to build it, they need real money. Not $2,000 from a garage, but hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. Jobs needs to find investors. He needs venture capital. He needs to convince rich and powerful men that a 22-year-old college dropout can build the future. It's an impossible sale. But Steve Jobs is about to meet the man who will make the impossible possible. And that meeting will turn a garage operation into one of the most valuable companies on the planet. The revolution is about to begin. Episode 3, The Meteoric Rise, Fall of 1976. Steve Jobs desperately needs capital. Apple has sold a few hundred units of the Apple I. But to build the Apple II, to bring it into mass production, they need real money. Jobs is 21 years old. He wears ripped jeans and sandals. He still occasionally smells bad. He has no business experience. No serious investor takes him seriously. So Don Valentine, one of Silicon Valley's most respected venture capitalists, agrees to meet with him, more out of curiosity than real interest. Valentine enters the job garage. He sees wires everywhere, circuit boards scattered on tables. 2 scruffy boys are soldering components. The meeting lasts 15 minutes. Valentine leaves, shaking his head. He calls his colleague, Regis McKenna, a public relations expert. "You just met a couple of weirdos from a garage," he says. "One of them is Steve Jobs. I'm not going to invest, but you should meet him. There's something there." McKenna is intrigued. He agrees to meet, and he sees exactly what Valentine didn't. Vision, passion, and absolute certainty that computers will change the world. McKenna introduces Jobs with Mike Markula. Mike Markula is 34 years old and a retired millionaire. He made his fortune trading stock options at Intel. Now he spends his days playing golf and thinking about his next move. When he meets Jobs and Wozniak, something clicks. Markula isn't a genius engineer like Woz. He's not a charismatic visionary like Jobs. But he understands business. He understands marketing. He understands how to scale a startup. And he sees something no one else sees, that the Apple II could be the product that brings computers into everyday homes. In November 1976, Markula agreed to invest $91,000 of his own money. He also secured a $250,000 line of credit from Bank of America. But there are conditions. Apple must be formally incorporated. It must stop being a garage operation and become a real company. It must hire professional employees. It must have a business plan. And Jobs needs to grow up. He needs to shower regularly. He needs to wear shoes to meetings. He needs to behave like a CEO, not a garage hippie. Jobs accepts everything because he finally has what he needed: money, credibility, and a mentor who believes in him. On January 3rd, 1977, Apple Computer Company becomes Apple Computer Inc. The era of the garage is over. The era of the corporation is about to begin. April 1977, West Coast Computer Fair in San Francisco. It is the first major personal computer fair on the West Coast. The place is packed with tech enthusiasts, nerds with calculators on their belts, and engineers showing off homemade circuit kits. Everything looks amateurish, homemade, like a high school science project. And then there's the Apple stand. Jobs insisted that his presentation be different. They've invested $5,000 in a professional booth with backlit panels. The computers are in injection-molded beige plastic cases, designed by Jerry Manick. There are no exposed wires, no exposed circuitry. The Apple II looks like a household appliance, a finished product, something that belongs in a home, not a laboratory. As people approach, Wozniak runs a demonstration he's programmed. Color graphics that create vibrant, sharp images on a standard television monitor. It's the first time most of these people have seen color graphics on a personal computer. The crowd gathers. Orders begin to arrive. By the end of the fair, Apple had taken 300 orders. The personal computer revolution has just accelerated exponentially. 1978. Apple moves from the Jobs family home to a real office in Cupertino, then to a bigger one, then to another. Apple II sales soar. In the first year, $2 million in revenue. The next year, $7 million, then $15 million, then $48 million. The growth is dizzying, almost impossible to manage. Apple hires engineers, salespeople, support technicians, and managers. From a dozen employees, they grow to hundreds. The company doubles its workforce every 6 months. Jobs is 23 years old. He's a millionaire on paper. He still lives simply. A mattress on the floor, few possessions, vegetarian food. But his ego is starting to inflate. He becomes more demanding, more critical, more cruel to employees who don't meet his impossible standards. Divide the world into 2 categories: geniuses and losers. There's no middle ground. You're either brilliant or trash. Employees begin to fear him, but also to respect him, because Jobs is right more often than he is wrong. His product intuition is almost supernatural, and he's obsessed with one idea: that Apple isn't just a computer company. It's a company that will change how humanity lives. 1978. Amid Apple's meteoric rise, Steve Jobs faces a personal crisis he'd rather ignore. His high school sweetheart, Kristen Brennan, is pregnant. She insists the baby is Steve's. He flatly denies it. "I can't be the father," he says. "I'm sterile. I've had other girlfriends and nothing ever happened." Kristen gives birth to a baby girl on May 17th. She names her Lisa Nicole Brennan. Jobs refuses to acknowledge her. He refuses to pay child support. He says Kristen had relationships with other men, that the baby could be anyone's. Kristen applies for social assistance. The state of California sues Jobs for child support. The press is starting to ask questions. Why does young millionaire Steve Jobs disown his own daughter? Finally, in 1980, a paternity test confirmed with 94.4% certainty that Jobs was a father. The judge orders him to pay child support, $385 a month, a ridiculously low amount for someone worth millions. Jobs pays, but he doesn't visit Lisa. He doesn't talk to her. He doesn't publicly acknowledge that she's his daughter. Years later, he'll admit that this was one of the moments he regrets most in his life. But in 1978, he's too focused on Apple, too scared of fatherhood, too selfish to accept the responsibility. It's abandonment on repeat. He, who was given up for adoption, now abandons his own daughter. The cycle continues. December 1979. Steve Jobs visits the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, known as Xerox PARC. It's a magical place. Xerox's brightest scientists work here, creating technologies that are decades ahead of their time. And Xerox has no idea what it has. As part of an investment agreement, Xerox purchased 100,000 shares of Apple stock for $1 million. In return, Apple gains access to PARC's secret technologies. When Jobs enters a lab, he sees something that stops his heart: a computer with a graphical user interface, overlapping windows, icons, a mouse controlling an on-screen cursor. All visual, intuitive, no command lines, no programming. Jobs is electrified. "Why aren't you doing anything about this?" he asks the Xerox engineers. They shrug. Xerox executives sell photocopiers. They don't understand computers. They don't see the potential. But Jobs sees it. He sees it with absolute clarity. This is the future. The computer for everyone. Not for engineers, but for teachers, writers, artists, children, for ordinary people. He leaves Xerox PARC in a state of creative frenzy. "They don't know what they have," he tells his team. "Let's take this to the world." Years later, when Jobs is accused of stealing Xerox's idea, he will respond with Picasso quote: "Good artists copy, great artists steal." But this isn't theft. It's rescuing a brilliant idea from corporate bureaucracy that would have let it die. December 12, 1980. Apple Computer goes public. The initial price is $22 per share. In a matter of minutes, it rises to $29. By the end of the day, Apple is worth $1,778 million. It is the most successful initial public offering since Ford Motor Company in 1956. Steve Jobs, at 25 years old, is worth $256 million on paper. Wozniak is also worth hundreds of millions. Mike Markula is incredibly rich. Even Apple's former secretary became a millionaire. But there are problems. Jobs has argued with several early Apple employees. Some didn't receive enough stock options. Some were excluded entirely. Wozniak, who is generous by nature, donates some of his own stock to early employees he felt were treated unfairly. He calls it the Woz Plan. Jobs is furious. He sees this as a criticism of his leadership. Tensions between the two Steves begin to grow. But at this point, nothing can tarnish the triumph. Apple is one of the fastest growing companies in American history. And Steve Jobs is the face of the personal computer revolution. He's young. He's rich. He's visionary. He is unstoppable. Or at least that's what he thinks. 1981. Apple is working on multiple projects simultaneously. There's a computer called the Apple III, which is having technical problems. There's a business computer called the Lisa, supposedly named as an acronym, but everyone knows it's the name of the daughter Jobs doesn't recognize. And then there's the secret project, the special project. The project Jobs is obsessed with controlling. It's called Macintosh. It's originally the project of Jeff Raskin, a brilliant computer scientist who wants to create a low-cost computer for the masses. Something simple, accessible, easy to use. But Jobs sees something bigger. He sees the opportunity to create the computer he saw at Xerox PARC. The computer with a graphical interface. The computer that anyone can use. Jobs takes control of the project. Raskin, furious, eventually resigns. The Macintosh team moves to a separate building. Jobs puts a pirate flag on the roof. "It's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy," he says. They're working on something revolutionary. They're working 18 hours a day. Jobs pushes them relentlessly. He insults them. He inspires them. He makes them believe they're changing the world. Because they are. August 1981. IBM, the corporate computing giant, launches the IBM PC. For most companies, this would be terrifying. IBM is the largest technology company in the world. It has unlimited resources. It dominates the enterprise market. But Jobs is euphoric. By a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal. The ad reads, "Welcome, IBM." Seriously. It's part joke, part arrogance, part strategy. Jobs wants to position Apple as the friendly rebel against the cold corporate giant. It's David versus Goliath, the garage versus the empire, creativity versus bureaucracy. But there's a problem. The IBM PC isn't technically better than the Apple II, but it's cheaper, and it has something Apple doesn't: IBM's backing. Corporations trust IBM. Sales of the IBM PC explode. Suddenly, Apple has real competition, and Jobs realizes that Apple needs something revolutionary. It needs a product so advanced, so different, that it makes the IBM PC seem obsolete. You need the Macintosh, and he needs it soon. 1982. The Macintosh project is behind schedule, way behind schedule. Jobs promised it would be ready in 1982, then 1983. Now they're aiming for January 1984. The team is exhausted. The engineers work 100-hour weeks. Jobs changes his mind constantly. He demands impossible perfection. He wants the Macintosh to have a sleek case design. He wants boot time to be less than 30 seconds. He wants it to be quiet with no cooling fan. He wants beautiful fonts. He wants it to be insanely great. The engineers tell him it's impossible, that the specifications are contradictory, that they need more time. Jobs refuses to listen. True artists end. He says, "Stop making excuses and make it work." The tension is brutal. Some engineers quit. Others have nervous breakdowns. Some begin to hate Jobs. But they're also creating something special, something no one has seen before. And in January of 1984, the world will finally see it. It's December 1983. There's 1 month to go until the launch of the Macintosh. Steve Jobs is 28 years old. He's famous. He's rich. He's considered a visionary genius. But he's also hated by many at Apple. He's seen as a tyrant, a narcissist, someone who takes credit for others' work. Apple's board is worried. Jobs is brilliant, but immature, unpredictable, difficult to control. So they hire someone to balance it out. Someone with experience. Someone who can be the adult in the room. His name is John Sculley. He's the CEO of Pepsi-Cola, a brilliant corporate executive with a proven track record. Jobs personally recruits him with one of the most famous lines in business history. "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Sculley accepts. He becomes CEO of Apple. Jobs remains president. Everyone believes it will be a perfect partnership. The visionary and the executor. The artist and the businessman. But they are wrong. Because in 4 years, one of them will have been kicked out of Apple. And it won't be John Sculley. Episode 4. 1984. January 22nd, 1984. Super Bowl 18. More than 96 million people are watching the biggest game in American football. In the third quarter, a commercial appears that no one will ever forget. The screen shows a dystopian world in black and white. Rows of humans with shaved heads march like zombies toward a giant screen. On it, Big Brother speaks in a monotone about uniformity and control. Suddenly, an athletic woman wearing an orange top and white shorts runs down the hallway. She's carrying a giant hammer. The thought police are chasing her. She spins and throws the hammer at the screen. It explodes in a blinding flash of light. Then the text appears. On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984. It's a direct reference to George Orwell's novel. The message is clear. IBM is Big Brother. Corporate conformity is the enemy. Apple is the liberator. The commercial is only 60 seconds long, but it changes advertising forever. January 24th, 1984. Flint Center in Cupertino. 2,600 people fill the auditorium. Shareholders, Apple employees, tech press, investors. The lights go out. The music begins. It's Chariots of Fire, epic and emotional. Steve Jobs walks onto the stage. He's wearing a suit and bow tie. He looks young, nervous, excited. 2 years ago, we launched the Apple II, he begins. We didn't say much about it. We just introduced it. Today, we want to do something similar. We want the Macintosh to introduce itself. Jobs pulls the Macintosh out of a bag. It's small, compact, with a built-in screen and a curved beige casing. It looks like a friendly appliance, not an intimidating machine. Insert a disk. The computer boots. And then something extraordinary happens. The Macintosh speaks. Hi, I'm Macintosh. It really feels good to be out of that bag, he says in a synthesized voice. The audience erupts in applause and laughter. The computer continues to introduce itself, displaying beautiful fonts, crisp graphics, and an intuitive interface with icons and windows. When the demonstration ends, the audience is on its feet, applauding. Steve Jobs has tears in his eyes. You have created something that will change the world. Or so he thinks. In the first few months after its launch, the Macintosh sold well. 70,000 units in the first 100 days. The press loved it. Graphic designers adopted it immediately. But there are serious problems. The Macintosh has only 128 kilobytes of RAM. That's very little. Applications run slowly. It freezes frequently. It doesn't have a hard drive. It only has a floppy disk drive. This means you have to constantly swap disks to do anything. It doesn't have a fan. Jobs insisted it be quiet. But this means it overheats. The internal components literally melt after hours of use. And it's expensive. $2,495. IBM computers are cheaper and more powerful. By the fall of 1984, sales plummeted. Distributors returned inventory. Early buyers were frustrated. The Macintosh, which was supposed to change the world, is failing commercially. And Jobs, who staked his entire reputation on this product, is in denial. 1984. The relationship between Steve Jobs and John Sculley begins to fray. At first, they were like father and son. Sculley admired Jobs' vision. Jobs respected Sculley's business experience. But now, with the Macintosh failing, the differences become apparent. Sculley wants to focus on the Apple II, which still generates the majority of the company's profits. He wants to invest in traditional marketing. He wants to reduce costs and improve margins. Jobs sees it as a betrayal. He believes Sculley doesn't understand the vision, that he's killing innovation to protect short-term profits. The board meetings become tense. Jobs is combative, emotional, and irrational. He accuses Sculley of not supporting the Macintosh, of giving up too quickly. Sculley, more diplomatic, tries to reason with Jobs. But Jobs doesn't listen. He just attacks. The board is beginning to doubt Jobs. He's brilliant, yes, but he's uncontrollable. And the company is suffering. May 1985. Apple reported its first quarterly loss in years. Macintosh sales continue to decline. Employee morale is at rock bottom. The board of directors holds an emergency meeting. They decide something needs to change. John Sculley proposes reorganizing the company. He wants to remove Jobs from day-to-day management of operations. Jobs can retain his title as president, but without real power. Jobs finds out. He's furious. He begins plotting against Sculley. He secretly talks to the board members. He tries to stage a coup. He wants Sculley fired and himself reinstated as Apple's leader. But Sculley discovers a plan. On May 24th, 1985, Sculley called an emergency board meeting. He presented an ultimatum. Either Jobs left or he left. The board votes. They unanimously support Sculley. Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, the visionary who created the company in a garage, is stripped of all power. He's 30 years old, and he's just lost everything. The following months are the darkest in Steve Jobs' life. He no longer has any responsibilities at Apple. He goes into the office occasionally, but has nothing to do. Employees avoid his gaze. He's a ghost in the company he created. He feels betrayed, humiliated, lost. Travel to Europe. Visit Paris, Italy, Russia. Seek inspiration. Search for a new purpose. Find none. He returns to California more lost than before. One night, he calls Mike Markula, his old mentor. Mike, what do I do? How do I move forward? Markula gives him some simple advice. Steve, you're 30 years old. You have tens of millions of dollars. You can do anything you want. So do something great. Start over. Jobs remain silent. Start over. Can you do it? Can you create something new from scratch? So you have an idea that will change everything. September 13th, 1985. Steve Jobs submits a one-page resignation letter to Apple's board of directors. As you know, the position of Apple chairman has become meaningless, he writes. Therefore, I am resigning as chairman, effective immediately. But the letter has a second part, a bombshell. Jobs has decided to start a new computer company, and he's taking 5 key Apple employees with him. The board is furious. Scully is furious. They feel Jobs is stealing their intellectual property, their talent, their trade secrets. Apple sues Steve Jobs for $100 million. The press is having a field day. Jobs betrays Apple. Founder becomes enemy. Fall of a genius. Jobs counterattacks at a press conference. Apple has focused on short-term profits rather than long-term innovation, he says. I'm leaving because I want to build something extraordinary, and I can't do that at Apple. It's bitter, it's public, it's ugly, but Jobs is free, and he's hungry. October 1985. Steve Jobs founds his new company. He calls it Next Inc. The vision is ambitious, to build the perfect computer for higher education. Something so advanced that universities won't be able to resist. Jobs invests $12 million of his own fortune. He hires top designers. He rents an elegant office. He designs a perfect logo, a tilted black cube, elegant and mysterious. But there are problems from the start. Jobs is as perfectionist as ever, obsessed with every detail. The cube must be perfectly cubic, every angle exact. The magnesium casing must be flawless. Development takes years. Costs skyrocket. The next computer, when finally launched in 1988, cost $10,000. She's beautiful. She's powerful. She's revolutionary. But it's too expensive. Universities can't afford it. Sales are miserable. Next is failing. Once again, Jobs has bet everything on a vision. And once again, he seems to be losing. It's 1987. Steve Jobs is 32 years old. He's been ousted from Apple. His new company, Next, is struggling to survive. But there's something else going on. Something Jobs didn't plan for. Something that started as a distraction and will become one of the most important achievements of his life. Jobs has just purchased a small computer graphics department from Lucasfilm, George Lucas's company. He bought it primarily for its technology, not its creative talent. The department has fewer than 50 employees. They make animation software. They make some animated shorts that no one sees. They call themselves Pixar. And they're about to create a cinematic revolution that no one saw coming. But first, Jobs has to learn a lesson he never learned at Apple. How to let other geniuses shine. How not to be the center of attention. How, for the first time in your life, to be patient. Episode 5, The Desert, February 1986. Steve Jobs is in a meeting at Lucasfilm, George Lucas's production company. Lucas is going through a costly divorce and needs cash. He's selling off assets. One of them is a computer graphics group, a small department that makes computer rendering and animation software. Jobs isn't really interested in animation. He's interested in technology. The group has developed software called RenderMan that can create photorealistic 3D images. Jobs thinks he can sell it to hospitals and government agencies for data visualization. He offers $5 million. Lucas accepts. Jobs changes the group's name to Pixar after the computer system they manufacture. There are about 44 employees. Most are software engineers. But there's a small creative team led by a man named John Lasseter. Lasseter is an animator who was fired from Disney for wanting to use computers to make animated films. He's a dreamer, an optimist, and obsessed with storytelling. Jobs sees it as a distraction. an unnecessary expense. He has no idea that Lasseter will be the person to save Pixar. 1986 to 1990. Pixar is constantly losing money. Millions of dollars a year. Jobs invests more and more of his own fortune. 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, more than 50 million in total. He's trying to sell the hardware. Pixar image computers. They're powerful machines that cost $125,000 each. They only sell a total of 300 units. It is a commercial failure. Jobs considers shutting down Lasseter's animation division several times. It's expensive. It doesn't generate revenue. It seems like an expensive hobby. But each time, Lasseter convinces him to keep it open. Just one more year. We're close to something big. Lasseter and his team make animated shorts to showcase the technology. One is called Luxo Jr., about a baby desk lamp. Another is called Tin Toy, about a tin toy terrified by a baby. The shorts are charming. They have emotion. They have soul. And they start winning awards. Tin Toy wins the Oscar for Best Animated Short Film in 1988. It's the first time a computer animation has won an Oscar, but prizes don't pay the bills. Pixar is slowly dying. 1989. In the midst of all this professional struggle, something changes in Steve Jobs' personal life. He's giving a talk at Stanford Graduate School of Business. In the audience is a 25-year-old student named Laureen Powell. She's smart, ambitious, and studying for her MBA. After the talk, Jobs sits next to her at dinner. They talk for hours. There's an immediate connection. Jobs asks her out. They start seeing each other. It's different from her previous relationships. Laureen isn't intimidated by him. She challenges him. She balances him out. On March 18, 1991, they were married in a small ceremony at the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite National Park. It was officiated by a Zen Buddhist monk. Jobs is 36 years old. He's finally beginning to grow up, to understand that life is about more than work and success. They will have 3 children together. Jobs will be a better father to them than he was to Lisa, although his relationship with his eldest daughter will remain complicated for years. Laureen becomes his anchor, his confidant, the person who can tell him the truth when no one else dares. And in the dark years to come, he will need it more than ever. 1991. Pixar is on the verge of bankruptcy. Jobs has invested more than $50 million of his personal fortune. Next is also struggling. Jobs is losing on 2 fronts. Then John Lasseter has a bold idea to make a fully computer-animated feature film. It's never been done before. The technology barely exists. But Lasseter thinks they can do it. Jobs is skeptical, but he's desperate. He needs something that works. Lasseter pitches to Disney. The idea is simple. A movie about toys that come to life when humans aren't looking. It will be called Toy Story. Jeffrey Katzenberg, head of Disney Animation, is intrigued. Disney has struggled with its recent animated films. They need something fresh. Offer a deal. Disney will finance 3 films. Pixar will make them. Disney will distribute them and keep most of the profits. The terms are terrible for Pixar. Disney has all the power, but it's the only option. Jobs accepts the deal. It's May 1991. Pixar has 3 years to make its first film. If it fails, it's all over. 1993. The production of Toy Story is a disaster. Disney is constantly interfering. Jeffrey Katzenberg demands that the film be more adult, more edgy. He wants Woody, the main character, to be more sarcastic, more mean-spirited. Lasseter and his team rewrite the script following Disney's notes. They produce a new version and present it to executives. It's terrible. Woody is unpleasant. The jokes are cruel. The story has no heart. Disney halts production. They're considering canceling the entire film. Lasseter is devastated. He's worked on this for years. His dream is crumbling. Jobs, for once in his life, doesn't panic. He doesn't shout. He doesn't blame. Instead, he calls Disney and negotiates. Give us 3 months, he says. Let us remake the movie our way. If you don't like it, you can cancel it. Disney accepts. Lasseter and his team work day and night. They rewrote the entire script. They returned the original idea, a heartfelt story about friendship, jealousy, and finding your place in the world. 3 months later, they show the new version to Disney. Silence in the screening room. Then, applause. Disney gives the green light. Toy Story will return to production. November 22nd, 1995. Toy Story opens in theaters in the United States. It's the first fully computer-animated film in history. No one knows if it will work. Will people accept digital characters? Will the technology be a distraction? In its opening weekend, Toy Story grossed over $29 million, making it #1 at the box office. The reviews are incredible. Roger Ebert gives it 3.5 stars. A visual and narrative masterpiece, he writes. The film grossed $362 million worldwide. It's a cultural phenomenon. Children and adults alike love it. And suddenly, Pixar is the most exciting animation company on the planet. Steve Jobs, who nearly shut down the animation division 5 times, who lost over $50 million at Pixar, finally has a hit. But it doesn't stop there. November 29th, 1995. 1 week after the release of Toy Story, Pixar goes public. The initial price is $22 per share. By the end of the day, it rises to $39. Pixar is worth $1.2 billion. Steve Jobs, who owns 80% of the company, is worth more than $1 billion on paper. He is officially a billionaire. After 10 years in the wilderness, after losing Apple, after failing with Next, after almost bankrupting Pixar, Steve Jobs has returned triumphantly. But there's an irony here. Jobs didn't create Toy Story. He didn't direct it. He didn't write it. He was barely involved creatively. John Lasseter and his team made it. They're the creative geniuses. But Jobs did something equally important. He didn't give up. He kept investing when everyone else was telling him to back off. He believed in the team when no one else did. He learned to be patient, to let others shine, to not always be the center of attention. It's a lesson you'll need to remember very soon. 1996. While Steve Jobs is enjoying the success of Pixar, Apple is dying. The company he co-founded, the company that ousted him, is in free fall. Sales have fallen. Microsoft and Windows dominate the market. Apple has lost relevance. Its market share is less than 4%. The company has gone through 3 CEOs in 10 years. None have been able to stop the decline. Apple is losing $1 billion a year. Analysts predict that Apple will go bankrupt in 18 months. Gil Amelio, the current CEO, is desperate. Apple needs a new operating system. The one they're developing, called Copeland, is a disaster. It doesn't work. It's years outdated. Amelio begins looking for alternatives. He considers purchasing BEOs from Jean-Louis Gassi, a former Apple executive. He considers licensing Solaris from Sun Microsystems. And then someone suggests, how about Next? Next operating system, Next Step, is technically brilliant. It's years ahead of its time. It's stable, powerful, and elegant. And it comes with something else. Steve Jobs, December 1996. Apple announces it will purchase Next for $429 million. As part of the deal, Steve Jobs will return Apple as an advisor to Gil Amelio. When Jobs returns to the Apple campus after 11 years, it's an emotional moment. Employees who remember him line the hallways. Some applaud. Others are scared. They know Jobs is brutal, relentless. Jobs walks the halls with a mixture of nostalgia and determination. This is the place where he changed the world. The place where he was betrayed. The place that nearly destroyed him. And now he's back. In the early meetings, Jobs is supposedly an advisor, but he quickly begins to take control. He criticizes everything. The products are garbage. The marketing is weak. The vision is lost. Amelio realizes his mistake. He's brought back a man who can't be contained. A man who won't accept second place. In July 1997, Apple's board of directors fired Gil Amelio. Steve Jobs is named interim CEO. It took 12 years. But Steve Jobs has turned his company around. August 1997. Steve Jobs gives his first presentation as Apple's leader at the Macworld Expo in Boston. The audience is anxious, skeptical, and hopeful. Apple is dying. Can Jobs save it? Jobs takes the stage. He looks older, more mature, calmer than the arrogant young man who was ousted in 1985. Apple has suffered, he begins, but it's not dead, and we're going to prove that we can still make amazing products. Then he makes an announcement that shocks everyone. Apple and Microsoft are forming an alliance. The screen behind Jobs shows Bill Gates' giant face on video. The audience boos. Gates is the enemy. Microsoft is the evil empire, but Jobs calms them. We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose. That's over. He then announces that Microsoft will invest $150 million in Apple, that Microsoft Office will continue to be available for Mac, that the two companies will work together. It's a masterstroke. Apple gains capital and credibility. Microsoft avoids antitrust charges by keeping its only competitor alive. But Jobs has a bigger plan, much bigger, and it will begin with 4 words. Think differently. It's September 1997. Steve Jobs is 42 years old. He spent 12 years in the desert. He failed with Next. He almost bankrupted Pixar. He lost hundreds of millions of dollars. But he also learned. He learned humility. He learned patience. He learned that he can't always be right. He learned to listen to other geniuses instead of just yelling at them. And now he's returned Apple with a mission to save the company he co-founded. But Apple is in ruins. The products are confusing. There are dozens of different Macintosh models that no one understands. The brand is dead. The company is losing money. Jobs is maybe a year, maybe less. If he can't turn things around quickly, Apple will close forever. It needs a masterstroke, a product that reminds the world why Apple matters. You're thinking of something simple, something beautiful, something different, a computer for the internet age, a computer that anyone can take out of the box and use in 10 minutes. He'll call it iMac, and everything will change. Again, Episode 6, The Renaissance, September 1997. Steve Jobs calls a meeting with the entire Apple product team. In the conference room, there's confusion. Apple has dozens of different products. Desktops, laptops, servers, printers, consumer models, professional models. There's the Macintosh Performa, the Power Mac, the PowerBook, and licensed Mac clones. No one can explain the differences. Not even Apple employees understand the product line. Jobs listens for 30 minutes. Then he stands and walks to the whiteboard. He draws a simple 2x2 matrix. At the top, he writes consumer and professional. On the side, he writes desktop and laptop. For products, he says, that's all we need. A consumer desktop, a consumer laptop, a professional desktop, a professional laptop. The room is silent. What about everything else? Someone asks. It's canceled, Jobs replies. Everything. Today. At that point, Jobs killed 70% of Apple's products. It's brutal. It's risky. But it's necessary. Apple needs focus. And Jobs knows exactly where to start. September 1997. Jobs meets with the advertising agency TBWA /Chiat/Day. We need to remind the world who Apple is, he says. Not about processors or megabytes. About values. About who we are as a company. The creative team returns with a campaign called Think Different. It's simple but powerful. Black and white ads featuring cultural icons. Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King Jr., Bob Dylan, Pablo Picasso, Amelia Earhart, Muhammad Ali, Mahatma Gandhi, Alfred Hitchcock. The voiceover says, "Here are the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the ones who see things differently, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." It doesn't mention products. It doesn't show computers. It only shows securities. Jobs is excited. This is perfect. This is who we are. The campaign launched in September 1997. It is instantly iconic. Apple isn't selling computers. It's selling a philosophy, an identity, a way of seeing the world. And people respond. 1998. Jobs is obsessively working on the first product of his new Apple, a consumer desktop computer. He hires Jonathan Ive, a brilliant British designer, who had been at Apple for years but never held any real power. Jobs immediately recognized his genius. "I want a computer that's unlike anything else out there," Jobs tells Ive. "Something people want to touch. Something beautiful." Ive returns with radical designs. The one Jobs chooses is revolutionary, an all-in-one computer with a translucent casing in a bright blue color called Bondi Blue. You can see inside. The components are visible through the translucent plastic. It's organic, friendly like an adult toy. It doesn't have a floppy disk port. Jobs eliminates it. "The floppy disk is dead," he says. "The internet is the future." Engineers protest. Customers need floppy disks to transfer files. "They'll adapt," says Jobs. You are right. May 6, 1998. Steve Jobs introduces the iMac to the world at the Flint Center, the same place where he launched the Macintosh 14 years earlier. "Today we're introducing the iMac," says Jobs. "It comes from Internet and Mac. It's the computer for the Internet age." He removes the cloth covering the iMac. The audience gasps. It's beautiful. It's different. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. The slogan is perfect. iMac, out of the box, on to the Internet. Jobs explains a philosophy. "You know what's wrong with computers today? They're too complicated. We want you to be able to take the iMac out of the box and be on the Internet in 10 minutes. The demo works perfectly. The iMac boots up quickly. It connects to the Internet in a couple of clicks. It displays vibrant web pages on the bright screen. The press loves the design. Consumers love it. Even people who hate computers want an iMac. It was launched in August 1998. It sold 278,000 units in its first 6 weeks. It is the fastest success in Apple's history. Steve Jobs has saved the company. January 2000, Macworld Expo in San Francisco. Steve Jobs has been Apple's interim CEO for 2.5 years. The title is always at a lowercase I in front of it. ICO as a joke. It has completely transformed Apple. The company is profitable again. The iMac is a massive success. Apple has launched new models in vibrant colors: strawberry, lime, grape, tangerine. Morale is high. The brand is reviving. During his presentation, Jobs pauses. "As you know, I was ICO for a while. The interim CEO." The audience laughs nervously. "Well, I'm going to drop the I," he says. The screen behind him shows ICO with the I disappearing. The audience applauds wildly. Steve Jobs is officially the CEO of Apple again. It took 15 years, but he has regained his throne. 2001. Apple is successful again, but Jobs knows it's not enough. Computers are just one part of the digital future. Music is being transformed. Millions of people are illegally downloading songs through Napster and other pirate services. Jobs sees an opportunity. People want digital music, he tells his team, but the experience sucks. MP3 players are horrible, complicated, ugly, with terrible interfaces. Start a secret project to create the world's best digital music player. The team works for 9 months. Jobs is involved in every detail: the size, the weight, the interface, the controls. They invented something called the click wheel, a circular wheel that lets you scroll through thousands of songs with your thumb. It's intuitive, elegant, addictive. The device is the size of a deck of cards. It has a 5-gigabyte hard drive that can store 1,000 songs. The battery lasts 10 hours. They call it iPod. The slogan is simple and perfect: 8,000 songs in your pocket. October 23rd, 2001. Steve Jobs introduces the iPod at a small press meeting on the Apple campus. He takes the device out of his pocket. It's small, white, and beautiful. Music is a part of everyone's life, he says. But existing MP3 players are really ugly. The interface is terrible. We fixed it. Demonstrates the click wheel. Shows how quickly you can navigate your music library. Shows off the distinctive white earbuds. The press is confused. It costs $399, says a reporter. Other players cost $100. Why would anyone pay 4 times as much? Jobs smiles. Because it's the best. And when you have one, you'll understand. Initial sales are slow. The iPod only works with Macs, which have less than 5% of the market. It's expensive. Critics call it a toy for rich Mac users. But there's one problem no one has solved. Where do you get legal music for your iPod? Jobs has a plan for that, too. 2002, Steve Jobs begins a series of meetings with the heads of the big five record labels: Universal, Sony, Warner, BMG, EMI. These companies hate the internet. They're terrified of piracy. Napster nearly destroyed them. They've sued thousands of people for illegally downloading music. Jobs makes them a bold proposal: sell their music digitally through Apple. 99 cents per song. No subscriptions. Simple ownership. Executives are skeptical. Why would we give our music to a computer company? They ask. Jobs is persuasive. Because we're going to do it the right way. Easy. Legal. At a fair price. And we're going to protect your music with DRM, so it can't be easily pirated. He shows them prototypes for something called the iTunes Store. A sleek digital store where you can listen to 30 seconds of any song and then buy it with one click. Executives argue. They negotiate. They fight over terms. Finally, everyone accepts. Jobs has achieved the impossible, convincing the entire music industry to embrace digital. April 28, 2003. Steve Jobs introduces the iTunes Store. "We've created something magical," he says. 1 million songs, all for 99 cents. No subscription. You buy a song, it's yours forever. The demo is fluid. Jobs searches for a song. He listens to it. He buys it with one click. It downloads in seconds. It syncs automatically with his iPod. You can download a song faster than you can find and download a pirated version, he says. And it's legal, and it's top quality. In the first week, the iTunes Store sells 1 million songs. In the first year, 70 million. The music industry has been transformed forever. And Apple has created an ecosystem: hardware, iPod, plus software, iTunes, plus content, iTunes Store. It all works together perfectly. It's a strategy Apple will use for the next 2 decades. It's 2004. Steve Jobs is 49 years old. Apple has been completely transformed from a dying company to a cultural and technological powerhouse. The iMac saved Apple. The iPod made a mainstream phenomenon. The iTunes Store changed the music industry forever. Jobs is once again seen as a visionary genius. He's on the cover of magazines. He's CEO of the Year. He's a cultural icon. But there's something no one knows. Something Jobs is hiding. In October 2003, during a routine exam, doctors found something in his pancreas. A tumor. Jobs has cancer. And the way he handled this diagnosis, the decisions he made in the coming months, nearly cost him his life. Because even in the face of death, Steve Jobs believes he knows more than everyone else. Even their doctors. Episode 7. The Empire and Mortality. October 2003. Steve Jobs is in an MRI machine at Stanford University Medical Center. Doctors have found a tumor in his pancreas. Normally, this is a death sentence. Pancreatic cancer is one of the most lethal cancers. The 5-year survival rate is less than 5%. But Jobs has extraordinary luck. Her tumor is a rare type called a pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor. It's slow growing. And most importantly, it's operable. The doctors are clear. You need surgery immediately. If we operate now, your chances of survival are excellent. Jobs should feel relieved. He dodged a bullet. But he doesn't agree to surgery. Instead, he decides to treat himself. Jobs believes in alternative medicine. He has been a vegetarian for decades. He believed that diet can cure illness. He believes in acupuncture, herbal remedies, and spiritual healing. For 9 months, he refused surgery. Instead, try special diets, fruit and vegetable juices, herbal treatments, a naturopath, a psychic. His wife, Lorene, begs him to listen to the doctors. His friends implore him. The doctors warn him that he's making a terrible mistake. But Jobs is stubborn, arrogant. He believes his intuition, which has served him so well in business, will also work for his health. "I don't want to be opened," he tells his wife. "I don't want to be invaded." It's the same mindset that made him great at Apple, the belief that he can bend reality to his will. But biology can't be hacked like software. Cancer is not impressed by willpower. And during those 9 months, the tumor grows. July 2004, Jobs finally agrees to surgery. It's been more than 9 months since the diagnosis. The doctors are furious. Those months could have been crucial. The surgery is called the Whipple procedure. It's extremely complex. Surgeons remove part of the pancreas, part of the small intestine, the gallbladder, and part of the bile duct. The operation lasts for hours. When Jobs wakes up, the doctors have mixed news. The surgery was successful. They removed the tumor, but the cancer had spread. They found cancer cells in the liver. If Jobs had agreed to surgery immediately before it spread, he would probably be completely cured. Now, his prognosis is uncertain. Jobs realizes what he's done. He later tells his biographer, Walter Isaacson, "I regret delaying the surgery. It's one of my few regrets. But the damage is done." 2005, Jobs is recovering from surgery. He's thinner, weaker, but his mind is as sharp as ever. And he's obsessed with a new idea. Cell phones are terrible. Smartphones like the BlackBerry are complicated, with small keyboards and tiny screens. iPods are great for music, but they can't make calls. Jobs sees an opportunity to converge everything into a single device. "I want to create a phone," he tells his team, "but not a regular phone. A phone that's also an iPod, and an internet device, and a camera, all in one." His team is skeptical. Apple knows nothing about phones. Phone companies are difficult to negotiate with. The market is dominated by Nokia, Motorola, and Samsung. But Jobs is insistent. "We're going to revolutionize telephony like we revolutionize music." The most secret project in Apple history begins. Project Purple. 2005 to 2006. A small team of engineers works in a separate building on the Apple campus. They have special security badges. The windows are covered. No one can enter without authorization. They're building a phone without a keypad, just a touchscreen. It's a radical idea. All phones have keyboards. How do you type without physical buttons? Jobs has the answer, a virtual on-screen keyboard. It appears when you need it. It disappears when you don't. But there are massive technical problems. Existing touchscreens are resistive. You need to press hard. You can't do multi-touch gestures. The team develops a new technology, capacitive touchscreens that respond to the lightest touch. They invent gestures, tap, swipe, pinch to zoom. Jobs is involved in every decision. The screen size, the thickness of the device, the shape of the icons, the haptic feedback. It has to feel like magic, he says. It has to be so easy that even your grandmother can use it. For 2 years, hundreds of engineers work in secret. And in January 2007, they are ready to show it to the world. January 9th, 2007, Macworld Expo in San Francisco. The Moscone Center is packed to the rafters. Steve Jobs walks onto the stage wearing jeans and his iconic black turtleneck. He looks slimmer than before, but full of energy. "This is a day I've been waiting for 2.5 years, he begins. "Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. Apple has been fortunate to introduce a few of these to the world. In 1984, we introduced the Macintosh. It didn't just change Apple. It changed the entire computer industry. In 2001, we introduced the first iPod. It didn't just change the way we all listen to music. It changed the entire music industry." Jobs pauses. The audience is completely silent. Today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products. The first is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a revolutionary internet communication device. Repeat this several times. iPod, phone, internet. Do you get it? These aren't 3 separate devices. It's one device. The screen behind him shows the 3 icons merging, and we call it iPhone. The audience explodes with applause. Standing, shouts, whistles. Jobs takes the iPhone out of his pocket. It's beautiful, slim, all screen, with just one button at the bottom. He spends the next hour demonstrating each feature. He browses the internet. He zooms in on photos with his fingers. He plays music. He makes a call. He reads emails. Everything works perfectly. iPhone is 5 years more advanced than any phone on the market, says Jobs. You are right. June 29th, 2007. The iPhone goes on sale in the United States. The lines outside Apple stores began days earlier. People camped in the streets. Some had tents. Others brought folding chairs. When the stores open at 6 in the evening, the scene is pure madness. Thousands of people rush in. The first customers are greeted with applause from Apple employees. In the first weekend, Apple sells 270,000 iPhones. The reviews are incredible. A device that will change everything, writes David Pogue of the New York Times. The best phone ever created, says Walt Mossberg of the Wall Street Journal. But there are problems. The iPhone is expensive, $599. It only works on AT&T's network, which is slow and unreliable. It doesn't have an app store. You can't copy and paste text. The competition sneers. Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer laughs in an interview. $500 for a phone without a keyboard? It doesn't stand a chance. But Jobs knows something his competitors don't. He's created a platform, not just a product, and is about to open it to the world. July 2008. Jobs introduces the App Store, a digital marketplace where third-party developers can create and sell iPhone apps. It's the same strategy that worked with iTunes, creating an ecosystem where hardware, software, and content work seamlessly together. But this is bigger, much bigger. With the App Store, Apple is inviting millions of developers to build on the iPhone platform. They are democratizing software creation. Developers create games, productivity tools, social media apps, fitness apps, news apps, anything imaginable. Apple takes 30% of each sale. Developers keep 70%. In the first weekend, people download 10 million apps. In the first year, there are 50,000 applications available. The iPhone is no longer just a phone. It becomes a pocket computer, a camera, a game console, a library, a map, a gym, everything. And each app makes the iPhone more valuable, which makes more people buy iPhones, which attracts more developers. It is an unstoppable virtuous circle. January 2010. Jobs introduces another product, the iPad. It's a tablet, a touchscreen device larger than an iPhone but more portable than a laptop. Critics are skeptical. It's just a big iPhone, they say. Who needs this when you already have a phone and a laptop? But Jobs has a different vision. He sees the iPad as a computer for people who never want a computer, for older people, for children, for people who find laptops too complicated. Technology alone isn't enough, Jobs says in presentation. It's technology married to the liberal arts, to the humanities, that produces results that make our hearts sing. The iPad is selling better than anyone expected. 1 million units in the first month. 15 million in the first year. It creates a whole new category. Tablets are becoming ubiquitous in homes, schools, hospitals, and restaurants. Jobs has done the impossible again. He created a product that people didn't know they needed, and then they can't live without it. January 2011, during the iPad 2 unveiling, Steve Jobs appears on stage looking dangerously thin. His face is gaunt. His cheekbones are prominent. His clothes hang loosely on his body. The audience gasps silently. Something is terribly wrong. In fact, Jobs has been battling cancer for years. In 2009, he received a liver transplant. He's been undergoing chemotherapy. He's taken multiple medical leaves of absence. Apple has kept this a secret. Jobs is intensely private about his health. But now it's impossible to hide. Rumors are swirling. How sick is Jobs? How much time does he have left? In August 2011, Jobs finally accepts the inevitable, resigns as CEO of Apple. Tim Cook, his right-hand man for 14 years, takes his place. Jobs becomes chairman of the board. But everyone knows it's a ceremonial title. Steve Jobs is dying. It's September 2011. Steve Jobs is 56 years old. Over the past 14 years, since returning to Apple. He has created the most valuable company in the world. It has revolutionized 6 industries: personal computers with the iMac, music with the iPod and iTunes, telephony with the iPhone, software with the App Store, tablets with the iPad, and animation with Pixar. He has turned Apple from a company worth $1 billion into one worth over $350 billion. It has created products that more than 1 billion people use every day. But now, her body is finally giving in. The cancer she delayed treating in 2003 has spread. Treatments no longer work. Jobs spends his final weeks at home with Laureen and his children. He's at peace. He's lived the life he wanted to live. He's created what he wanted to create. But there is one last thing you must do. One last conversation. One last lesson. One last gift to the world. And that conversation will begin with a biography that tells the full story, unfiltered and uncensored. The truth about Steve Jobs in his own words. Episode 8, The Legacy. 2009. Steve Jobs asked Walter Isaacson, the former editor of Time magazine, to write his biography. Isaacson is surprised. Jobs has always been intensely private. He has turned down multiple offers for authorized biographies. Why now? Isaacson asks. Jobs doesn't answer directly. But Isaacson understands. Jobs knows he's dying. He wants to tell his story before it's too late. Over the course of 2 years, Isaacson interviewed Jobs more than 40 times. They spoke in Jobs' living room, in his kitchen, and during walks around the neighborhood. Jobs is brutally honest. He talks about his childhood, about being given up for adoption, about abandoning his own daughter, about his failures, his mistakes, his cruelty to employees. But he also talks about his vision, his philosophy, what he learned. I want my children to know me, Jobs tells him, and I'm not always around them. I want them to know why I wasn't. I want them to understand what I did. It's a final act of honesty, a final attempt to be understood. September 2011. Jobs is at home in Palo Alto. He can't go out anymore. He can barely eat. The cancer has spread throughout his body. The pain is constant. Medication keeps him in a semi-conscious state. Laureen is with him constantly. His children visit him every day. His sister, Mona Simpson, reads aloud to him. Tim Cook comes to brief him on Apple. Jobs listens, asks lame questions, and gives occasional advice. But he knows he's no longer in charge. Apple will continue without him. That's what he built. A company that can survive without its founder. Friends come to say goodbye. Bill Gates, his old rival, his new friend, sits by his bed for hours. They talk about technology, the future, the meaning of their lives. We were both lucky, says Jobs. We both went on to change the world. October 5th, 2011. Steve Jobs is surrounded by his family. Laureen is holding his hand. His children are by his bed. His sister Mona is there. Jobs has been unconscious for hours. His breathing is irregular. He's near the end. Suddenly, he opens his eyes. He looks beyond his family, as if seeing something they can't see. Then he says his last words, 3 times. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Close your eyes. And he leaves. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon on October 5th, 2011. Steve Jobs is 56 years old. Minutes after Jobs' death, Tim Cook sends an email to all Apple employees. I have very sad news to share with all of you. Steve passed away today. Apple has lost a visionary and creative genius, and the world has lost an amazing human being. The news spreads quickly. Within minutes, it's everywhere. Twitter explodes. News sites publish commemorative articles. Apple shares fall in after-hours trading. Outside Apple stores around the world, people are starting to leave flowers, notes, candles, iPhones, and iPads. Makeshift shrines are springing up spontaneously. At Apple headquarters in Cupertino, employees weep openly. They lower a flag to half-staff. The world is in shock. Although everyone knew this was coming, the reality is devastating. Steve Jobs has died. Reactions come from all over the world. President Barack Obama issues a statement. The world has lost a visionary, and there will be no greater tribute to Steve's success than the fact that much of the world learned his death on a device he invented. Bill Gates says, "The world rarely sees someone who has had the profound impact that Steve had. The impact will be felt for many generations to come." Mark Zuckerberg writes, "Steve, thank you for being a mentor and a friend. Thank you for showing us that what you build can change the world." Even his old enemies are praising him. Microsoft, Google, Samsung, all are posting tributes. But perhaps the most moving words come from ordinary people. "It changed my life," someone writes on Twitter. "My first Mac taught me graphic design. Now it's my career. The iPhone keeps me connected to my daughter, who lives in another country," writes another. "Thanks, Steve." Thousands of similar messages. Millions. Steve Jobs didn't just change technology. He changed lives. October 19th, 2011. Apple hosts a private memorial for Steve Jobs on the Stanford campus. Close family members, Apple executives, and Jobs' lifelong friends are in attendance. Tim Cook speaks. His voice cracks. "Steve taught us that we can change the world." And he did, time and time again. U2's Bono sings Bob Dylan's "Every Grain of Sand," one of Jobs' favorite songs. Lorraine talks about the Steve the world didn't know. The husband, the father, the man who loved walking barefoot, who obsessed over architecture, who cried during the Pixar films his company created. He was imperfect, he says. He made mistakes. He hurt people. But he also loved deeply. And he built things that will matter for generations. It's a celebration and a mourning, a farewell and a recognition. Steve Jobs is dead, but what he built will live on forever. In the months since Jobs' death, the question is on everyone's mind. Can Apple survive without Steve Jobs? Skeptics say no. Jobs was Apple. Without him, the company will lose its magic, its vision, its soul. But Tim Cook proved them wrong. In September 2012, Apple launches the iPhone 5. It sells 5 million units in its first weekend. In 2013, Apple was worth over $500 billion. In 2015, it was worth over $700 billion. In 2018, Apple became the first American company to be worth more than $1 trillion. Jobs built Apple to last. He hired the right people. He established the right culture. He created processes that work without him. Steve taught us to think differently, Cook says in an interview. That didn't die with him. That's in Apple's DNA. And he's right. Steve Jobs' impact on technology is impossible to overstate. Before the iPhone, phones had physical keyboards. After the iPhone, all phones are touchscreens. Before the iTunes Store, music was purchased on CDs. Now everything is digital. Before the iPad, tablets didn't exist as a category. After that, they're everywhere. Before the Macintosh, computers use command lines. After that, they all use graphical interfaces. Jobs didn't invent the personal computer, but he made it accessible. He didn't invent the digital music player, but he made it desirable. He didn't invent the smartphone, but he made it indispensable. His genius wasn't the invention. It was the execution, the design, the simplification, the humanization of technology. Technology is nothing, Jobs once said. The important thing is that you have faith in people, that they're fundamentally good and smart, and if you give them tools, they will do wonderful things with them. That was his philosophy, and it changed the world. But Steve Jobs' legacy is complicated. He was a genius. He was also a tyrant. He created beautiful products. He also humiliated employees. He changed industries. He also abandoned his daughter. He was a vegetarian concerned about the environment. He also ran factories in China with terrible working conditions. He talked about thinking differently. But he created one of the most controlled corporations in the world. He was a man of contradictions. His eldest daughter, Lisa, wrote a book called Small Fry about her complicated relationship with him. It's honest, painful, and unvarnished. Jobs eventually reconnected with Lisa in his later years. He paid for her college. They tried to rebuild their relationship. But the early damage was never completely erased. It was difficult being Steve Jobs' daughter, Lisa wrote. But I also had moments of love, moments where I saw the man behind the myth. That's a true legacy, a complex, deeply flawed, but undeniably brilliant man. 2005, Steve Jobs gave the commencement address at Stanford University. It's one of the most famous speeches ever given. Millions of people have watched it on YouTube. In it, Jobs tells 3 stories from his life, about connecting the dots, about love and loss, about death. When I was 17, he says, I read a quote that went something like this: if you live each day as if it were your last, someday you'll be right. It made an impression on me, and ever since then, for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Then he talks about death. Nobody wants to die, he says. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is a destiny we all share. Nobody has evaded it. And that's as it should be, because death is quite possibly life's greatest invention. It's life's agent of change. It clears away the old to make way for the new. It ends with a phrase that will become legendary. Stay hungry. Stay foolish. Stay hungry. Stay crazy. It's the essence of Steve Jobs in 4 words. It's 2025, 14 years after the death of Steve Jobs. Apple is worth over $3 trillion. It's the most valuable company in the world. More than 2 billion people use Apple products every day. The iPhone is on every continent. The iPad is in every classroom. The Mac has had a renaissance. Pixar has made 27 films. It has won 16 Academy Awards. It has grossed over $14 billion at the box office. The digital revolution that Steve Jobs helped create has transformed every aspect of human life: how we work, how we communicate, how we learn, how we entertain ourselves. But perhaps his most important legacy is not his products. It is the idea that one person with vision and determination can change the world, that you don't have to accept the status quo, that you can think differently, that you can create something that never existed before. Steve Jobs was born in a San Francisco hospital. He was given up for adoption. He grew up in a Silicon Valley garage. He dropped out of college. He was ousted from his own company. He failed repeatedly, but he never gave up. He never stopped creating. He never stopped believing he could do something extraordinary. And he did. He wasn't perfect. He was difficult. He was cruel at times. He made terrible mistakes. But it changed the world. And that's Steve Jobs' final lesson. You don't need to be perfect to do something great. You just need vision, passion, and the will to keep going when everyone else gives up. Because here are the crazy ones. The misfits. The rebels. The troublemakers. The ones who see things differently. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify them, or vilify them. But the one thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some see them as crazy, we see genius. Because people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world, they are the ones who do it.